the movie ends, and yet this is how actually we tend to think that this is how the happily forever after will be. But in fact, no, there will be lots of struggles, there will be lots of fights, and fights can actually enhance and deepen our relationship and get us closer. This is another important misconception, that we tend to think that actually by fighting, we're actually getting apart. It only depends on how we're fighting. So we tend to see movies or all those assumptions, and we tend to fill in the gaps. So our subconscious mind tends to say, okay, so this is beautiful, this is what we want, and so this is how it should be. So we should be living happily forever after. But that's not all the story. This is just the beginning, and there's a long way. So love is a journey and not a destination.
Hey, it's Rocky. Welcome to Richer Soul. Today's guest is George Araman, who's going to help us find lasting love and build better relationships. Imagine it's 12 months from now, and you've achieved your major life goals. How does it feel to be in the best shape of your life? To wake up energized, excited about the day? To have great relationships and friends who support you and propel you forward? How does it feel to have an excess of money, to be able to make the choices you want? To be fearless and open to trying new adventures? Imagine being connected to the universe and it providing everything you desire. It's possible over time, and your past does not dictate your future. The only thing holding you back from this vision is you. It's time to take control of our thoughts and use them to our advantage. Welcome to Richer Soul, where we achieve our dreams and bring balance to health, wealth, relationships, time, and spirituality. If you have not had a chance to listen to episodes 1 through 9, I encourage you to go back and listen to the framework behind Richer Soul and how to create the life of your dreams. You can also find all the show notes for this episode at richersoul.com. While you're there, you can sign up for a monthly email where I share the best articles I read this month, let you know about upcoming episodes, and share a little wisdom. You can also listen to coaching calls under the Coaching Calls tab. I also share the most interesting articles I read every week on Facebook at facebook.com/Richer Soul. And there's also a Facebook group where you can ask questions and interact with other listeners. Today's quote is from Gloria Steinman. Far too many people are looking for the right person instead of trying to be the right person. That's some sage advice. This week, we focus on relationships. In the Harvard Grant study that followed people over their entire lifetimes to learn what factors led to a happy, healthy life, the number one factor was relationships. From relationships with your parents, your spouse, and your friends. Your past and childhood were not great predictors of success. We've had many successful people on the podcast who started from a bleak past. Today, we're going to dig deeper into the subject of relationships and finding love with our spouse. Before we do that, let's review our last action step. Adjust your LinkedIn profile by creating a targeted headline and optimizing the page to show off your diverse skills and accomplishments in detail. I've just finished updating mine. It was a long process. Check it out. Let me know what you think. What about you? Remember to build the connections and the relationships or employment before you need them, because it's hard to do much later when you do need to call upon them. Today's guest is George Araman, who has spent his time dancing between his heart and his mind. And he's created a 50-year vision of spreading some much-needed love around the world. So get ready for the relationship entrepreneur. George was blessed to have been friend-zoned by his ex-best friend, as this allowed him to discover his life's purpose. Since then, he's dedicated himself into researching, experimenting, and writing. He wrote the book, The Gray Dance of Love, to show singles, friend-zoned individuals, and couples how to create sparks and how to be and grow in a magical relationship. George believes that all the world's problems can be solved if we never give up. His message to you: your greatest treasure lies in your greatest struggle. If you never give up, even life itself will want to help you and make everything possible for you. He plans on traveling around the world with his life partner. He's already seen more than 30 cities in Europe, Asia, and the Middle East, and has been exposed to 26 different nationalities. Let's meet our guest. Welcome to Richer Soul, George Araman. It's great to have you join us today.
Thank you so much, Rocky. It's a pleasure to be here.
And I'm excited for the conversation as I've read the book and you've got some interesting stuff. But before we get to that, let's start at the beginning. What was it like when you were growing up, and how much did your family and school teach you about money?
Thank you for this wonderful question. Well, actually, before I wrote this book and I went into this path, I was actually really wanting to change, in a way, the system, because I do believe that there are two subjects that are not taught in school, and I believe is really a crime not to be taught in school. And they are the following. The first is what I'm actually doing. It's on relationships. And it's not just romantic relationships. It's also about relationships at work, relationships with friends, etc., etc. And most importantly as well is finance and money. We learn about economics, we learn about mathematics, and lots of other subjects, which is okay and nice and interesting, but we don't learn how to make money. And this is actually something, this is a very important subject, and I learned a lot from it from one of my mentors, Bob Proctor. It's really important and it's really crucial to actually teach children how to learn money. So the way I grew up was
changing. I think there's a lot more. Schools are starting to add it to the curriculum, but even then, it's still a struggle because unless the teacher understands money, it's very hard for them to teach money. And hopefully we can change that little by little. And the podcast also helps to teach people about money.
Indeed, it's beautiful what you said.
So you call yourself a relationship engineer. What does that mean?
Well, basically, the way the title came up with is because I'm different than other people. So I try to actually reverse engineer the whole process and actually join in two different approaches: the psychological approach and the sciencey approach. So it was more of an engineerical way or a systematized way to actually solve love or work on sparks and all those other stuff.
And as I was reading the book, I noticed that it was not just the one side of the love, but actually a way to, with practical steps about how to do it and how to increase your love life in a sense, or to build the relationships of love. You wrote the book, and the book is The Gray Dance of Love, a step-by-step guide to finding love that lasts. Why did you write the book?
It actually happened around 3 years ago. So I was actually friend-zoned by my ex-best friend. And I really didn't understand what was happening, but I really wanted to find a solution. So after actually mourning and playing the victim for 2 to 3 weeks, I said, you know what, George, you've been into the personal development world for quite some time. So it's time for you to actually find a solution and do something about it. So I was actually reading, I read more than 200 books, more than 1,200 plus articles, and I actually did an in-depth experiment to prove that all my theories were right. And I put them all inside this book. And hence, 3 years later, here we are.
So when you say you were friend-zoned, what does that mean?
So being in a friend zone is more like, for example, you're in love or you have attraction with your friend, for a friend of yours. And this is actually what happened. So my ex-best friend and I were really, really very close. And while she did love me and I did love her, I was in love with her. She wasn't in love with me. Basically, she was not attracted to me. She was attracted, but not with the hormones level, let's say. So this is what happened. This is why I got friend zoned. And by the way, we're not only friend zoned with friends, we can also be friend zoned if we are in a relationship for a long time. So couples, for example, that stop having sex, they have been friend zoned.
I guess the question is what causes that to happen?
In short, very simply, we have a lot of friends quality and very limited or very low lover quality. So there's something that's very important that we tend to forget, is that it's important to actually embrace both our lover side and our friendship side. And I do actually talk about it inside the book. I haven't seen it much in other books and places. It's either this or that. And to give you an example, in general, what women love in bad boys is not because they're bad or because they're like who they are. And they always say like, no, we don't like the bad boys. We like the nice guys. They do like the nice guys, but they don't like the nice guys who are always nice. They like the nice guy who is actually confident, who is actually masculine, who knows what they want, who's getting what they want, etc., etc. So this is what actually they're looking for in a man, in short. So by having this confidence, by having this real masculinity, this real raw masculinity, I'm not talking about the extreme and unhealthy masculinity, but the good one, when you're present and you hold space and a lot of other stuff, this is actually when you are not friend zoned.
That's interesting. So I know in the book you talk about different types of connections, and it says magical love is the result of these powerful connections. So one is physical chemistry, the connection of the body. The other is intellectual chemistry, connection of the mind. And then the third was emotional chemistry, connection of the heart. So let's kind of dig into these. When you say physical chemistry and the connection of the body, what does that mean?
Physical chemistry is literally just hormones at play. Now, some people might get offended and believe that, no, to create attraction and sparks, it's not just about the hormones, but a lot of it has to do with the hormones. And inside the book, I do talk about how we can play with different hormones to actually create sparks anytime, anywhere, any place, and with anyone. Almost, let's say almost, in order not to go into specific, there are always exceptions. But in general, we can actually really do that. And it's all about being masculine and feminine, having this dance between the two. And it's really just about that mainly. So this is what I would say is physical chemistry. It's actually what something we learned in school. If it would make more sense for our viewers or listeners who are not familiar with masculine and feminine energy, it's like when we were taught in school in our chemistry class about two polar opposites or two magnets who are actually of opposite poles. They actually attract each other, whereas when they're similar, they actually repel each other. And it's the same with masculine and feminine energies, and masculine and feminine energies is actually more related to relationships. So this is in general, or in short, what is physical chemistry. When it comes to intellectual chemistry, there are a couple of interesting findings that I found. And the first ingredient, for example, is about fixed mindset and growth mindset. I was inspired by this from Carol Dweck, who wrote a beautiful book on mindset. And it's really important to notice that nowadays, and it's starting to change, but we're still very far from that, we tend to have a fixed mindset when it comes to relationships. So, for example, to give you an example, a man in general, again, I'm always generalizing man and woman, they can go both interchangeably. So men in general, when they tend to go into a relationship and before getting married or so, they see marriage as more like the end. So they're like, it's actually the end of their singlehood. And this is why, for example, for them, they actually crave and really want this bachelor party, because for them, the bachelor party is actually a celebration or a party to actually end their celibacy. Because they really see this as a doomsday, let's say. I'm being maybe a bit over dramatical, but it's actually to pinpoint something. So a lot of men in general, we do believe that it's always good to have sex with multiple partners. And while it's okay to like that, what we need to know, what's very, very, very important is that for a man to know, and for a man and both men and women, that relationships in general, and by actually going with one partner, we can actually go deeper. So while having orgasm with multiple women is okay, it is nice. By having orgasms with one woman and going deeper than wider, we have much better orgasms. So this is a very important part. And this was just one example of why fixed mindset people is really not the state. By having growth mindset, we're more into like, how can we help each other? How can we grow together? How can we really help each other? And it's really much more towards what we're looking for. It's more a form of unconditional love rather than what can you get? Can I gain from you? What can you give me? What can I get? And all those other stuff. So another point, like for emotional chemistry, there's actually something that I found really interesting, and I, for instance, wasn't aware of it, is that when it comes to romancing women, for example, I used to think, and I believe that a lot of men have this misconception that romance is all about giving her flowers or gifts or all those external gifts or feelings and stuff. But as I was reading an article, a very interesting article by Liz Rave, she did enlighten something in me. And women are not really about after the roses or the flowers. They're more about the feeling behind it. So it's really how we make them feel. When they ask for romance, what they're asking for is sex, but it's not just sex, it's how we make them come alive. It's really like the more sexually turned on we are, the more they will feel it, and the more they will feel more emotionally connected. So those are very important and very subtle examples, but they are really, really crucial. So in short, this is what I would say about physical, intellectual, and emotional chemistry. There's, of course, a lot more to talk about. So I hope it's clear for now.
And thank you for sharing that. So one of the things that you talked about in the book is, you know, when people get married, they talk about happily ever after. But you say that people never really learn to live the after part. What does that mean?
I love this question. Thank you for asking it. Well, the reason is that most of us, either we grew up by watching Hollywood movies or Disney movies, or even before that, we tend to have this particular concept of love as in fairy tales. And don't get me wrong, fairy tales are beautiful. But what we see in movies, what we read in books, what we see, for example, nowadays on social media, is really only a facade or the tip of the iceberg. It's really, for example, I'm going to give a couple of examples like Beauty and the Beast. They are great movies and all, but we just see the beginning of a relationship. So when in this example, for example, when Belle falls in love with the prince and the prince transforms and they kiss, the movie ends, and yet this is how actually we tend to think that this is how the happily forever after will be. But in fact, no, there will be lots of struggles, there will be lots of fights, and fights can actually enhance and deepen our relationship and get us closer. This is another important misconception, that we tend to think that actually by fighting, we're actually getting apart. It only depends on how we're fighting. So we tend to see movies or all those assumptions, and we tend to fill in the gaps. So our subconscious mind tends to say, okay, so this is beautiful, this is what we want, and so this is how it should be. So we should be living happily forever after. But that's not all the story. This is just the beginning, and there's a long way. So love is a journey and not a destination. We tend to see movies, and I'm taking the example of movies to facilitate the discussion. So in this case, movies are actually not they're the destination, and it's not what we want. It's more of a journey. So this is why, it's important to note that we can have our happily forever after, but it's important for us to be aware that it's important to work and it's not always going to be rosy every single day. it's actually by embracing those fights that we can actually get closer, bond deeper, and actually really go much better and really live our happily forever after.
And that's interesting, because I think one of the issues people have is after you get married and you've been married for years, you probably fall into fixed set routines. What should people do to keep the sparks going and to make their marriage better after decades?
It's very true. And we tend to get into, as you mentioned, into the routine. Thank you for mentioning that, Rocky. And it's all about putting it in a different way. So we can still have our routines, and routines are actually very powerful by creating rituals and all that stuff. So by specifically choosing our right routines, we can actually create even more sparks. What tends to happen after a couple of months or years of being together, whether it's because of a child or because of the way we've been brought up and things have shifted, we tend to actually settle and we tend to stop dating. And stopping to date is really a very bad idea. Yes, we all know and understand we have kids, we have to take care of the kids, we have a lot of work and all this. And it's fine, it's beautiful and it's fine. But at the same time, it shouldn't take over our relationship. So what's 2 hours of date per week? It doesn't have to be drastic. It's not about going like every single day or doing a lot of changes. We can start by including small little rituals. For example, it can be the way we kiss each other in the morning, the way we look at each other, the way we text each other. It can be just those small affections on a daily basis. And it can be one date night per week. And if it's really that hard and that impossible, maybe a date every 2 weeks. It would really help a lot to create more sparks, to rekindle the sparks. And if we can't, like for example, if people say that, okay, but we have kids, what can we do with them? They're at a young age. Well, there's always a solution. We can always try to either put them in the kindergarten or maybe our friends or our parents or I'm sure we're close to other people and we can actually do that for maybe 1 or 2 hours, or we can maybe call for a babysitter or anything. But really dating is really important because there's something that is important. We do go to work every day to gain income. We do brush our teeth every day. We do shower every day, take care of our body every day. We should also take care of our relationships every day. Relationships are not a destination, they're a journey. It's about empowering our journey. There's a famous quote from Zig Ziglar that I actually really love. And it goes along the following. Motivation doesn't last, but neither does bathing. This is what we recommended daily. And it's the same thing with relationships and taking care of our partner, of our relationship. If our relationships are important for us, then they should be a priority. Really, it's not just about, okay, now we're married or now we're in a relationship and that's it. Our partner will take care. No. It doesn't work that way. It's really about, okay, I'm with my partner. How can I surprise them today? What can I give to them today? What can I create for them today? It doesn't have to take much time. It's just about being creative.
So, George, you said people should go on dates once a week. What does that look like? Like, what makes for a great date?
That, in general, is relative. It depends on the types of values that we have. It depends on the activities that we have. So it can be really broad and really like people that love the outdoors. They can go have a camping, for example, on Saturday afternoon or morning. And people that like movies can go on a movie dinner. It's really, some of them can be a bit cliche, but some of them can be much more creative. So it depends on how creative we are. And by the way, the more creative we are, the more our partner would actually like us. And it's not just about the man. So it's important sometimes for the man to take the lead of dating, I believe. And it's also sometimes important for the lady or his partner, the woman, to actually do the same. because it's all about the balance. It's all about dancing here and there. And by surprising each other, this is how we show that we care for each other. And there are literally thousands. You can actually go on Google and type dating ideas, and you can really have a lot of them. It also depends on the city where we live in. We can go skiing, or we can go scuba diving, or we can go on a kangaroo ride back, or it really depends on which part of the world we are in, what we're doing, what we enjoy doing, basically. It can be as simple as just staying in and having a bubble bath together, or it can be like we were playing cards together, or going to the casino. It really depends on our own personal taste. It's just important to actually surprise our partner. And by surprise, it's not really about just surprising them. Like, you could set it for like every Thursday night we're going to have a date, but during this Thursday, this is where the surprise happens. And there's another idea that's actually very, very nice that I actually found, is that you can have a jar, and in this jar you can actually write down a couple of dating ideas and put them in a jar, and every week you can pick up one of those. So this is actually, I found it a very cute way that you can both do together and just decide and go with it.
That sounds like an excellent idea. So one of the things that I read in the book is that you said that multiple relationship experts have found that money and sex problems in relationships are often more about control issues. So what did you mean by that?
In the end, what we always fight, the only reason why we fight is to actually feel recognized. It's when we feel unloved, we feel unseen or unheard. So when that happens, this is when all the other issues start to bubble up. It's not about money. It's not about the kids. It's not about all that. It's really about attention. This is what I would say. This is why it's not really about money, but more about giving our partner. And by actually having those habits and having those small rituals, we won't be fighting anymore. Our fights will be different, actually. So we would actually solve problems together rather than against each other.
Is it okay to fight in relationships? I mean, we all do it. Is there a right way to fight, or?
It's actually very much recommended to fight. Well, not in the sense that, okay, like it's been a while we didn't fight, let's go fight. But actually, a lot of relationship experts have proven that the more that by actually fighting, we can unlock emotional intimacy. And one thing that's important as well is that, according to Dr. John Gottman, we can actually not avoid a relationship problem. So all problems are not going to be solved. In fact, if I remember the correct number, it's around 69% of our fights will not be resolved. It's about how we manage our fights. So if we're going to start bickering, if we're going to start having the entitlement mentality, if we're going to start having the 4 horses of apocalypse that Dr. John Gottman talks about, then it's all going to go down. On the other hand, if we're more positive, if we're more like, if we set boundaries, and like, for example, one thing that's very important is that we set boundaries for fights, and this should be held long before. And while we're fighting, we say, okay, this is a trigger. If we say this trigger, it means we really need to take a break from this fight, and we'll get back to it later on. If we're becoming very emotional, because if we're going to start name calling and all those stuff, it's not going to end well. So it's very important to actually set boundaries beforehand, and no name callings. Those are 2 great and important tips to actually fight well.
Today's episode is brought to you by Profit Comes First. As a certified Profit First professional, I help entrepreneurs and small business owners to grow their business profitably. What is a Profit First professional? I'm experienced and trained to guide business in their corporate growth. But quite frankly, you should expect that from any business coach you work with. What makes me unique is that I'm trained, certified, and hands-on experience in guiding businesses to grow profitably. I'm certified in the Profit First method and have direct access to accountants, bookkeepers, and other experts globally who are all trained on this method. Combined, we have over thousands of companies using Profit First in their business. What this means for you is that I have or can immediately get the answers for any challenges you face in growing profitability. Most business owners focus on top-line revenue, and while that's important, the bottom line, what you take home, and what's available to reinvest in the business is what drives continued long-term success in business. Learn more at ProfitComesFirst.com and schedule a no-obligation call to see how Profit Comes First can help put more money in your pocket. So one of the other things that I saw in the book, you said problems in your relationship are often the result of emotional thought patterns that stem from your childhood. A lack of self-love is often the backdrop for almost all of our relationship challenges. So can you explain that a little bit?
Yes, with pleasure. So actually, what tends to happen in general is that when we are born, we tend to model our parents or our caretakers or people that are authority figures that are taking care of us in one way or another. And we either model the relationship of our parents, how they are together, or we actually tend to pick up one of our parents and model their relationship with the other. And so for years, we tend to go on this way. It's very important to note that by not growing, by not evolving, and by not learning, we actually tend to stay the same that we are. And there are studies that show that we actually are, no matter what age we are, we tend to stay emotionally at the age of 6, 7, or 8 years old. We don't grow further than that because we've modeled what we had to model and we haven't grown since then. So what tends to happen is that we actually attract partners who are actually either to model the relationship our parents had or to have a relationship we had with one of our parents. And so this actually is why we tend to continue, and we tend to do that in order to heal our relationship with our parents or the relationship with them that we modeled. And unless we do that, we will keep on attracting those types of partner. So this is why it's important. And another example to be more concrete, a lot of the times, for example, women tend to attract the bad boys. It's for a certain reason. Once they actually get this pattern, once they actually know the pattern that they have and they actually solve it, this is how they can actually attract the real partner or the right partner for them.
So why are we attracted to the wrong people? Because that happens.
I wouldn't say we're attracting the wrong people. I would say that we are attracting the right people for us. And here's why. So let's say, for example, I'm a woman and I'm attracting a bad boy. Why would this happen? This would happen because me as a woman, I'm mainly more highly feminine, or feminine, let's say, and I want someone who's masculine. And this is what I'm looking for in the bad boy. So instead of looking for the masculine side inside of me, what I'm doing is as I'm actually looking for the masculine side outside of me. Because a relationship is actually a mirror of ourselves. We actually attract a partner to actually help us heal our own self. This is why for me there's no right or wrong, there's right for us. And so this bad boy, for example, would come and or bad girl or whoever, I'm just going with the example, that would come in order to show us what part inside of us we need to heal. And so once we do heal this part, then our relationships will magically transform and we will actually really attract the love of our life.
So I guess the question then is, if you heal yourself and you're married to somebody, do they then become the love of your life, or do you have to go find a new partner at this point? Or is it that you grow together and you improve yourselves on the journey?
It all depends on how our relationship is based. And usually when one of the partners is actually transforming and the other is not, this actually unfortunately tends to a distance between the two partners, whether it's through separation, divorce, or any other types of distance. On the other hand, if the other partner is actually willing and is working with us to transform, it doesn't need to be the exact same point. So it actually goes back to us being in a growth mindset or a fixed mindset. If we both have a growth mindset and we both want to grow together and really like learn and do different stuff, this is when actually we can, this is actually how we can do that.
So you can't have the mismatch, I guess, between the growth and the fixed mindset. That causes probably friction and doesn't help in building the relationship.
Yeah, so actually, at a certain point, it can work for a period of time, but after a certain point, it won't work unless, and there are exceptions, if the two of us or the two partners are actually fixed mindset, it might work. If both are growth mindset, it would work. If one is fixed, one is growth, then most probably it won't work.
And so it's important to understand that before you begin the relationship, and to understand the person and to dig deeper into who they are as a person. So I noticed you said one thing, and I know this is something that we talk about on the podcast all the time. It's you have to know your purpose and you have to be clear on it. And I think in the book you say it's hot to have a purpose and working on it gives you a sense of direction. So how does that help with your love life?
I love this question. Thank you for asking it. Well, it's very important to actually include this aspect because whether we're talking about relationship, whether we're talking about finance, whether we're talking about happiness or anything, if we don't know where we are or if we don't know where we want to go, then where are we going? What are we doing? There's no point. If it's just to roam and go into an endless state of numbness, then it's not just about having no point, but at a certain point, if we stagnate, and we would stagnate by not growing and by not changing and by not actually doing all those stuff, we would actually not, it wouldn't work. So it really wouldn't work.
So I noticed you say that you should have a purpose, and it's hot to have a purpose, and working on it gives you a sense of direction.
It's very important to actually have a purpose. It's like, it applies with happiness, with finance, with relationships. No matter what field or what area, it's always important to have a purpose, because if we don't have a purpose and we don't know where we are and where we're going to be, this is something I learned from Bob Proctor and other influencers like Jack Canfield, is that we actually, by not knowing where we are and where we're going to be, we're actually stagnating, or we're actually just roaming around, not knowing what to do, where to go. And this, at a certain point, leads to stagnation. And stagnation leads to death, metaphorically or virtually or metaphorically. And it would lead to the death of a relationship as well, because by not knowing what we want out of a relationship, if we don't know where we are when it comes to relationship and where we want to go, then the whole point of it is not working. Because, for example, let's say, I don't know if I'm a bad boy or a nice guy, whether I'm the right person, I don't know what my patterns are, so I don't know where I am, and so I'm going to keep on attracting what we call the wrong partner or the right partner for what I call the right partner for us. And so by doing that, first, we don't know where we are and we don't know where we're going, because by not knowing where we are, we actually all of us want to actually be in a perfect, wonderful relationship. And that's on a conscious level, but unconsciously, we are sabotaging ourselves. So this is why it's really important to have a purpose, and not just a purpose. I would say it's important to have a purpose for our relationship, whether it's our own personal purpose as individuals and as couples. I always very highly encourage couples or partners in relationships to actually have and develop a relationship purpose. It's also important to actually also have a mission and have common values and many other stuff.
And unfortunately, I don't think most people have those conversations in the dating phase always. They don't think through all of these other things, and maybe that's why they struggle later in life. And again, things do change. So I know this because you always hear this, but people always think they can get their partner to change, but that's not the case. You laugh about it. So how do you bring about the change if you're not happy with your current situation?
Thank you for that. Well, the first thing is that we cannot and will not be able to change anyone. The only person we can actually change is ourselves. And so by changing ourselves, this is how we can actually change our reality. By changing ourselves, by, for example, hiring our vibration and doing all the internal work, then we will start to attract externally the right partner for us. Maybe, and it can be through our own partner. So if we're in a relationship and we change, by doing all the internal change, maybe we would entice our partner to actually change themselves. And if they won't, then automatically what would happen is that we will start distancing ourselves, whether consciously or not consciously, and attract the right partner for us. So it's very true. But we can't change anyone. We can only change ourselves. And it's by changing ourselves that we actually change our own world.
And that's correct. You said doing the inner work. What did you mean by that?
The inner work is actually really all about whatever we want. It's important to be clear from inside. So let's say, for example, I want to attract the right partner or the ideal partner for me. So what's the ideal partner for me? And for years, I did it wrong. But then I actually figured it out through lots of reading and my own personal experiences and experiments, that actually what is important is that, and this is a very common misconception, when we are actually writing down our own list or list of things that we want in our partner, what is important to know is that we need to look at the list carefully and look at the things that are written down. So let's say, for example, I want her to be spiritual. And at the same time, if I'm not spiritual, then I won't be attracting a spiritual partner. Because the universe or God or however you want to call it, the higher power or nature, will tend to send to us a counterpart or a partner or someone that will actually be our mirror, someone that would be like us. So if we want our partner to be spiritual, then it's important to work on our own spirituality from the inside out for us to start becoming spiritual. And this is actually when we'll start to attract the right partner. And this was just one example of the many lists or attributes that we would be looking for. So I can give you an example about if we want our partner to be financial literate, then we need to learn how to be financial literate before expecting our partner to be financially literate. The list goes on and on. This is what I mean by internal work.
So you have to become the person that you want your partner to be.
Beautifully said.
That's very true. Very interesting. So one of the things you say is for a relationship to thrive, your partner has to be your soulmate, your life partner, and your best friend. The soulmate challenges you, the life partner connects with you, and the best friend supports you. So again, I think this goes back to what we just said. You have to be all of those things yourself then for your partner as well.
Exactly. So it's actually important because all those three aspects, we need to, as you were mentioning, we need to be from inside. We need to be our own best friend. We need to challenge ourselves, and we need to actually care for ourselves. And by doing that, by actually doing it from the inside out, this is how we actually attract the right partner for us, who would be all those three aspects, who would be our soulmate, who would be our best friend, and who would be our life partner.
And all of that takes work. You have to do the work. And that's, I think, where a lot of people struggle.
That's the beauty out of it, actually. I would call it home passion. So in my book, I actually talk about home passion instead of homework, because homework or work, we tend to look at it in a negative connotation, or tend to look at it as in like, oh, there's work, so it's not really fun. But we actually, by calling it home passion or passion, it's really more about connecting with ourselves and enjoying and experimenting with ourselves and with our partner. And once we do that, we fall in love with ourselves, we fall in love with life, we fall in love with our partner. Actually, we don't fall, we grow. I always tend to say, I don't believe we fall in love, we actually grow in love. So we grow in love with ourselves, we grow in love with life, and we grow in love with our own partner. This is very important.
And as part of that, I know you also talk about gratitude and two types of gratitude. Can you explain that a little bit more?
So there are different types of gratitude, and I'm not sure if this is what you were referring to. I'm going to talk about internal and external gratitude. Was that what you were referring to, or was that something else?
That's it.
So there's internal gratitude and external gratitude, and it's very important to actually really feel from the inside out. It's really important to actually, for example, bless our food before we eat it, to actually re-energize the food that we're eating, send it love, and this helps actually a lot. And another point is to actually be grateful from the outside. So there are two ways to actually approach it. We can either do it internally, or we can do it externally through different aspects, such as, for example, like blessing the food is more of an external factor. And yeah, so internal gratitude is more like a state of feeling. It's feeling like I actually really like what I'm doing. I really love this person. And this happens from repeated thoughts and repeated patterns and repeated emotional integration to that.
In the book, you talk about different relationship factors. I think there are 8 of them. Can you explain those?
Yeah, of course. So, well, I was actually doing all my research and experiments, and actually discovered that we all tend to fall into 8 relationship archetypes or 8 relationship characters. And I found that actually they're not talked about anywhere. So I actually put them inside the book, and here, I'm going to talk a little bit about them and introduce you to them. So I'm going to go to them for, 2 by 2. So we have Mr. and Mrs. Bad Sparks, which actually represent the bad boy and the bad girl, or to go to an extreme, the cheerleader and the captain of the basketball team, or the rugby team, whichever. So what tends to happen is that Mr. and Mrs. Bad Sparks are all about intense passion. They're all about, in the sparks, they're all about attraction and hormones. And this is all great. But when it comes to relationships, long-term relationships, they're really very bad at it. And so this is an important aspect. Then we have Mr. and Mrs. Nice Mirror. So Mr. and Mrs. Nice Mirror used to be Mr. and Mrs. Bad Sparks. But as society changed, as women started to go to work, and as this actually led to a change in dynamics, and it's no fault to any of the man or the woman, but what happened is that women in general tended to have to put the masculine mask on when they were at work, and either they forgot it when they came back home, or because the man wasn't able to actually help them relax into their feminine energy. So there's no one's at fault. It's just misunderstanding and miscommunication. This led to actually Mrs. Bad Sparks to become Mrs. Nice Mirror. So from being highly feminine, she became more masculine, and Mr. Nice Mirror actually became more feminine. And so those two kind of lost their way in relationships. They became more friends. They became more, they look more as like, what will society say? How can we be good in the eyes of society? Etc., etc. And so those two actually gave birth or brought up Mr. and Mrs. Friend Amore, and Mr. and Mrs. Friend Amore are actually the tomboy when it comes to the woman. So she's the person she's the lady who actually plays basketball with the guys. And you have Mr. Friend Amore, who's actually the doormat or the nice guy, but the really nice guy who actually wants to do everything for his woman or his partner. And he usually tends to friend zone. So you have all those 4 archetypes, 6 archetypes, and at the same time, all of them, they all have qualities and they all have shortcomings. But what is important is actually that I found 2 other archetypes. I discovered 2 other archetypes, which are Mr. and Mrs. Grey Dance. So Mr. and Mrs. Grey Dance are actually the ultimate relationship couple, the ultimate relationship partners, and they are the ones we actually want to be. So they are they are more balanced. They have a balanced masculine and feminine energy from the inside, and they're really whole and complete. And so inside the book, I talk about how we can actually go from one of the first 6 archetypes into the latter 2.
And there is detailed, your book goes into tremendous depth on that. And for that, it was very interesting reading that and how you bring about the change that is there.
Yes, very true. And actually, I would even take it a step further. So very soon on my website, you will be able to actually take a test and discover which of the 8 relationship characters that you are. And once you do that, then you will be able to have a 30-day challenge or a 30-day step-by-step guide where I would be taking you on a step-by-step guide, basically, from where you are to where you want to be. So if you are Mr. and Mrs. Baspark, Nice Mirror, or Friend Amore, I would help you by the hand to take you into becoming Mr. and Mrs. Great Dance.
That is very cool. What's one action step people can take this week to move forward?
Love themselves. It's very cheesy, very corny, very already talked about, but it's really important to actually love ourselves. And by loving ourselves, it's about forgiving ourselves. It's about learning our own relationship patterns. It's about really embracing both our masculine and feminine sides, and on and on. So I think those 3 are already very, very a lot to work on, let's say.
It's time to learn the secrets of life. What's your secret to living an abundant life?
My secret to living an abundant life is my mindset. I learned a lot from Bob Proctor. I learned a lot from Abraham Hicks and many others. And it's really, really about, as it's already been talked about, but it's really important to actually visualize and add emotions to the visualization and keep on doing it over and over and over and over again. Because we live in a connected universe, and whatever we put into, we actually get. So whatever we want to have in our life, whatever we want to see reflect in the physical world, we need first to create it internally. Once we actually do that, and really do that, not just on a theoretical or intellectual basis, but really by including and inserting the emotions and really living it on a daily basis, on a consistency over weeks and maybe months or years, this is actually how we can actually transform our lives, become financially independent and financially wealthy, and even more.
Well, thank you for sharing that. I mean, you are basically what you think and what you believe. And so if you imagine yourself in that way and you do the work, and as you said, it does take time, you become that. And so that's very important. What did you learn later in life that you wish you would have learned sooner?
Very nice question. I would have loved to learn, I would say the 2 courses we talked about at the beginning of our call. I would say how to learn money and how to be in relationships, like how to communicate, but really on a practical level. And I would want to know that from people who have actually been there and done that, not just any teacher or any person. So, for example, I would love to learn how to make money from someone who actually made money, and I would love from the ground up. And I would love to learn also how to be in a relationship, in a friendship, in any setting from people who have actually been successful by doing that. So I would actually love to model that.
It's funny, where we began is where we end. We come full circle, right? Right back to the beginning. And you're right. Those are 2 things that are not really taught in school, unfortunately. If you were to give an 18-year-old one specific piece of wisdom, what would it be?
Work on your self-image. This is one of the most important things I've learned from Bob Proctor. So it's really, really, really important to actually work on your own self-image and love who you are from the inside out. Accept who you are from the inside out. Live your dreams from the inside out. Once you are able to see yourself in love with yourself, with the world, very wealthy, happy, healthy, and all those stuff on a daily basis, once you put all this work in, and it's not easy because it's important to have the repetition and to repeat it over and over and over again, this is what actually will really shift and impact your life in a tremendous way.
And that's very true. And it's as you said, you have to keep showing up and doing the work and taking the steps and keep going. And it's a journey. It's a process and a journey, and it takes time. If people would like to find you and connect and get the book, what's the best way for them to do that?
Thank you for your question. I would say you can go to www.greatanceoflovebook.com. So it's www.greatanceoflovebook.com. GREYTANCEOFLOVEBOOK.com. And by actually going to this page, you would be shown a link to go to Amazon. You would be buying the book. And on this page, by returning to this page, you would receive 8 bonuses from very influential authors and friends of mine and colleagues of mine. Among them, you have Robert Clancy, you have Peggy McCall, Marcy Shimoff, Dr. Joe Rubino, and many others that were very kind enough to actually give away very valuable gifts. Some of them are meditations, others are guided books, and many others. So you would be receiving those 8 gifts. And on top of that, by actually buying the book, you will be giving $1 from the profits of this book to the Unstoppable Foundation in order to help raise children all around the world.
And thank you for sharing that. And I will also put it in the show notes to make it easy for people to connect. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Rocky. It was a pleasure talking to you.
I enjoyed reading the book, which had much more details than what we covered today. I encourage you to check it out. Clearly, relationships are important. And if your spouse leaves you, the emotional and financial burden is very high. We need to put the effort in to ensure that we're doing our part. Don't forget to check in and ask your spouse what you can do to improve. Remember, I said to ask about your improvements, not theirs. We can't change other people, just ourselves. This week's action step: love yourself, forgive yourself, learn your relationship patterns, and embrace your nature. We have to do our own inner work. It's not easy to face the reflection in the mirror, but when you do and you face up to it, wow, what an amazing life you build. Next week, we're going to have on one of my coaching clients on the podcast to discuss their journey and how it's going. Stay tuned. If you're still listening, you must have liked the episode, so please share it with a few friends. Maybe you can share it with your spouse or significant other to start a conversation. I'd appreciate that. Remember, you can connect with me on Facebook, on both the Facebook page and the Facebook group for Richer Soul. What's preventing you from moving forward, and who are you putting on your team to build the life you deserve? Taking no action creates a far worse outcome in life than trying something and failing. Can I help you achieve your goals through coaching and accountability? Just email me, and we can start with a short chat to see if we're a good fit for coaching. For many people, one session allows them to take a giant leap forward towards their dreams. You can always get me at rocky@richersoul.com. I'd love to hear how you're doing and how the information I've shared has helped you. Thanks for listening. Remember, it's the year of clarity, Vision 2020. Have an abundant week.